At 77, Billy Crystal finally reveals the truth about Robin Williams. When Robin Williams took his own life in August 2014, the world lost not just a comedic genius, but a man whose extraordinary gifts came intertwined with equally profound struggles. While millions mourned the public persona, the rapid-fire wit, the dazzling impressions, the boundless energy that seemed to defy human limits, a much smaller circle grieved for the private person they had actually known. Among this inner circle, perhaps no one understood the real Robin Williams, both his brilliance and his pain, more completely than his longtime friend, Billy Crystal. For over 30 years, these two comedy legends shared a bond that transcended professional collaboration or casual friendship, creating a connection where Williams could, at least occasionally, let the famous mask slip and reveal the more vulnerable human beneath. He was the fastest mind in Hollywood, the man who could make an entire room cry from laughter in seconds. But when the lights went off, something darker always lingered. Crystal revealed, in a recent reflection on their decades-long friendship, what people saw on stage or screen was just one dimension of Robin. I was fortunate enough, and sometimes heartbroken enough, to know the rest. Now, at 77, Crystal has finally opened up about the truth of Robin Williams, not to diminish his friend's extraordinary legacy, but to deepen our understanding of the complex, sensitive soul whose struggles were as profound as his talents were brilliant. Robin wasn't just a comedic genius, Crystal explained, his voice still carrying the weight of his loss years later. He was a man fighting battles most of us can't imagine, with a mind that never gave him peace. And yet, from that same restless mind came some of the most beautiful moments of connection and laughter any of us will ever experience. What Crystal has shared isn't the sensationalized tell-all that often emerges after a celebrity's death, but rather a thoughtful, loving perspective on a friendship that allowed him to see behind the public persona to the private person, a perspective that helps us understand not just who Robin Williams was, but the cost of the extraordinary gifts he shared with the world. Today, we explore the true nature of Robin Williams through the eyes of the friend who knew him best, a rare glimpse behind the dazzling performance to the complex humanity of a man whose light and darkness were inextricably linked and whose struggle to find balance between them ultimately proved too difficult to sustain. Billy Crystal's reflections on Robin Williams offer something beyond the typical celebrity remembrance. They provide insight into a friendship that allowed both men to be seen and understood in ways that their public personas rarely permitted. What makes Crystal's perspective particularly valuable is his unique ability to appreciate both the brilliant performer who captivated millions and the vulnerable human being who struggled under the weight of his own extraordinary mind. As a fellow comedian who navigated the complex terrain of fame while maintaining an unusually grounded personal life, Crystal could recognize in Williams both the magnificent gifts and the terrible burdens that came with possessing a mind that operated at such extraordinary speed and sensitivity. Through Crystal's eyes, we see not just the Robin Williams the world thought it knew, but the man behind the performance, a more complete truth that honors both the light he brought to others and the darkness he battled within himself. The mind that never rested. They were bonded by brilliance and burden. Billy Crystal didn't just know Robin Williams, he understood him in a way few others could. Their friendship, spanning more than 3 decades, was built on a foundation of shared brilliance, mutual respect, and a rare ability to recognize in each other both extraordinary gifts and the burdens those gifts sometimes carried. They weren't just friends, they were bonded by brilliance, burden, and something few others could ever handle. A brain that never shut off, explained a longtime mutual colleague who witnessed their relationship evolve from professional admiration to deep personal connection. Billy was one of the few people who could actually keep up with Robin's mind, who wasn't just dazzled or exhausted by it, but could actually engage with it. This mental synchronicity was evident to anyone who saw them perform together, whether in their comic relief charity events alongside Whoopi Goldberg, their memorable Oscar appearances, or their rare but electric late-night talk show encounters. Where others might be left speechless by Williams's improvisational brilliance, Crystal could not only follow his lightning-fast associations, but build on them, creating comedic exchanges that showcased both men's gifts while revealing the special chemistry between them. Robin's mind moved at this speed that almost no one could match, Crystal has explained. It wasn't just quickness. though God knows he was quick. It was the connections he made, the leaps from one idea to another that no one else would see. Most people would just watch in amazement. But sometimes, if I was really on my game, I could not only follow where he was going, but meet him there. Those moments, when we were completely in sync, were some of the most exhilarating experiences I've ever had. This mental connection extended far beyond their public performances. According to Crystal, their private conversations often took on the same rapid-fire quality, with ideas, observations, and jokes flowing between them at a pace that would have left most listeners struggling to keep up. But beneath this dazzling surface lay something deeper, a mutual recognition of the double-edged nature of such mental quickness. We talked on the phone constantly, not short calls, long, emotional conversations, Crystal revealed. Sometimes he'd start off manic, ideas coming so fast I could barely keep up, but then his voice would change, slow down, and that's when the real conversation would begin, the Robin beyond the performance. What Crystal came to understand through these conversations was that Williams' extraordinary mind, the same instrument that generated his unparalleled comedy, also created unique challenges. The brain that never shut off, that could make dazzling connections and inhabit multiple perspectives simultaneously, was also a brain that found stillness and peace elusive. You'd hear the mania slow down. The voice would change. That's when the real stuff came out, Crystal recalled. He would talk about not being able to turn it off. Not just the comedy, but the thinking, the constant awareness. It was like his mind was always working overtime, processing everything around him at this intense level. It gave him his genius, but it also exhausted him. This recognition of Williams's internal struggle allowed Crystal to see beyond the public persona to the more complex reality of his friend's experience. While audiences saw the boundless energy and seemingly inexhaustible creativity, Crystal witnessed the toll that such intensity sometimes took. He once told me that his mind was like having a Ferrari engine but no brakes, Crystal shared. Everyone focused on the Ferrari part, the speed, the power, the performance. But he was also telling me about the no-brakes part, about what it feels like to have this incredible instrument that you can't always control. Their shared understanding of the complexities of comedy, how it can emerge from pain as well as joy, how it can serve as both expression and armor, deepened their connection beyond what either man typically experienced with others in their profession. Both had built careers finding humor in the human condition, but they also recognized the vulnerability required to do so authentically. Comics understand each other in a way that's hard to explain to people outside that world, Crystal reflected. We know that the same sensitivity that allows you to see the absurdity in life, to find the perfect observation that makes people laugh, that same sensitivity means you feel everything more intensely. Robin felt everything, at maximum volume. That's what made him so brilliant on stage, and so vulnerable off it. This shared understanding created a space where Williams could occasionally set aside the constant performance that characterized many of his other relationships. With Crystal, he didn't always need to be on, didn't need to maintain the comedic brilliance that others expected from him. He could simply be himself, complex, contradictory, sometimes struggling, but always authentic. The greatest gift you can give someone like Robin was permission not to perform, Crystal explained. Most people, when they were around him, wanted the Robin Williams show. They'd be disappointed if they didn't get the manic energy, the voices, the improvisations. But what Robin sometimes needed most was space to just be a regular person, to not have to be brilliant for a while. Crystal provided this space, creating a friendship where Williams could experience the rare relief of being known and accepted for his full self, not just his public persona or his extraordinary talents. This acceptance allowed for a vulnerability and honesty that Williams seldom showed to the wider world. He was the kindest man in the room, and the saddest, Crystal once observed, capturing the duality that defined his friend. That's the truth people didn't see. The same mind that could bring so much joy to others was also the source of his own struggles. I think that's why we connected so deeply. I saw both sides, and I valued both equally. Not just the performer everyone loved, but the person underneath. Complicated, sometimes troubled, but always profoundly human.
A bowel. Yeah, Vanna White. Yeah. I'd like to buy a big bowel. Show me anus.
Behind closed doors, the dinner ritual, and rare moments of stillness. While Robin Williams, Billy Crystal, and Whoopi Goldberg became known to millions as the founding hosts of Comic Relief, raising over $80 million for homelessness causes through their televised charity specials, Few knew about the private ritual that followed these very public performances. After the cameras stopped rolling, after the audiences departed, these three comedy legends would share a quiet dinner together, creating a space where they could transition from their public personas back to their private selves. Every year, Robin, Billy, and Whoopi Goldberg would host Comic Relief, raising millions for the homeless. But what people didn't know was what happened after the cameras shut off. A dinner just the three of them. No press, no fans, explained a longtime producer of the charity events. They protected those dinners fiercely. No matter what Hollywood power players wanted to join, no matter what network executives might have wanted to be included, it was just the three of them. That was non-negotiable. Crystal has described these dinners as sacred spaces, rare moments when Williams could decompress from the extraordinary energy he had expended on stage and simply exist among friends who understood both the exhilaration and the cost of such performances. Those dinners were filled with joy, and also moments when Robin would suddenly go quiet, Crystal revealed. He'd just stare at the table, then look up and crack a joke. But for that pause, we saw him, really saw him. These moments of stillness, brief interludes when the famous Robin Williams energy would temporarily subside, allowed Crystal glimpses of his friend's interior life that few others ever witnessed. According to Crystal, these quieter moments weren't signs of depression or unhappiness, but rather windows into Williams's natural reflectiveness when he wasn't maintaining his public persona. People assume Robin was always on, always performing, always manic, Crystal explained. But that's not true. When he felt safe, when he was with people he completely trusted, he could be quiet, thoughtful, even philosophical. Those weren't sad moments. They were real moments. Moments when he could just be Robin, not Robin Williams, the performer everyone expected. The ritual of these private dinners created a container where all three comedians could process the emotional experience of the charity events, which often involved direct contact with the homeless people they were working to help. According to those familiar with these occasions, the conversations would move fluidly between hilarious recountings of backstage mishaps to serious discussions about the societal issues they'd encountered through their charitable work. What made those dinners special wasn't just that they were private, noted Goldberg in a previous interview about their friendship. It was that we could be our complete selves, funny one minute, deadly serious the next, vulnerable after that. No one had to maintain any kind of consistency or image. We could just respond authentically to whatever came up. For Williams in particular, these dinners provided a rare opportunity to be seen beyond his comedic brilliance, to be valued for his compassion, his intellect, and his genuine concern for others. Crystal has noted that some of Williams' most insightful observations about politics, human psychology, and social issues emerged during these post-show conversations. Robin was incredibly well-read, deeply thoughtful about world events, about history, about philosophy, Crystal recalled, but he rarely showed that side of himself publicly because he knew what people wanted and expected from him was comedy. In those private dinners, you'd hear him make observations that were so profound, so insightful, that you'd realize his mind wasn't just quick, it was deep. The depth of Williams' thinking often revealed itself in the questions he would ask during these intimate gatherings, questions that suggested his famous empathy extended far beyond what most people recognized. According to Crystal, Williams was haunted by the suffering he witnessed through their charitable work, carrying those experiences with him long after the events concluded. After one Comic Relief, we visited a homeless shelter in Chicago, Crystal remembered. Robin met this young woman, couldn't have been more than 20, with her little boy. They'd been living in their car until recently. He spent maybe 15 minutes talking with her, really listening to her story. At dinner that night, hours later, he suddenly asked, "Do you think she's going to be okay?" He hadn't forgotten her for a moment. That was Robin, carrying other people's pain alongside his own. This capacity for empathy and connection, so evident in these private settings, informed Williams' approach to both his charitable work and his performances. Crystal has suggested that Williams' ability to inhabit different characters with such conviction came from this same deep sensitivity to others' experiences. He'd just stare at the table, then look up and crack a joke. But for that pause, we saw him, really saw him, Crystal repeated, emphasizing the significance of these quieter moments. I think those pauses were when he was processing everything, all he'd seen, all he'd felt, all he'd absorbed from the world around him. Then the joke would come, almost like a release valve for when it all became too much to hold. These dinner rituals continued throughout the years of comic relief and beyond, creating a continuity in their friendship that transcended their professional collaborations. Even as their careers took different paths, with Williams focusing increasingly on dramatic roles, while Crystal continued to balance comedy with directing and hosting, these private connections remained a constant. Those dinners evolved as we did, Crystal noted. In the early years, they were more raucous, more about celebrating what we'd just accomplished. As time went on, they became deeper, more reflective. Robin's questions got more philosophical. What makes people happy? Why is connection so hard? What creates meaning in life? These weren't casual conversations. They were explorations of the things that mattered most to him. Through these private rituals, Crystal gained insight into aspects of Williams' character that remained largely hidden from public view. His thoughtfulness, his vulnerability, and his struggle to reconcile his public image with his private experience. This deeper understanding would prove invaluable as Williams faced increasing personal challenges in his later years, allowing Crystal to recognize signs of his friend's distress that others might have missed. The gift of those dinners, those quiet moments together, was that they established a baseline, Crystal explained. I knew what Robin was like when he was truly himself. So later, when things began to change, when something was off, I could recognize it. Not because I was especially insightful, but because I had seen him in those rare moments of authenticity when he didn't need to perform for anyone.
Yes.
Yes?
No, we were never in the shower together.
No, the boy and I were in the shower.
Yeah, he was soaping him up
And hosing him off.
and I would just watch it.
The protective performance, the mask he wore for others. As Billy Crystal came to know Robin Williams more deeply over their decades of friendship, he developed a unique understanding of the complex relationship between Williams's public performances and his private struggles. What appeared to most observers as natural exuberance and limitless creativity, Crystal recognized as something more nuanced, a brilliant but ultimately protective response to deeper emotional currents. Billy Crystal described Robin's humor as a mask, a brilliant, shimmering distraction from a constant inner war, explained a mutual friend who witnessed their relationship evolve over many years. It wasn't fake. The brilliance was absolutely genuine, but it was also functional. It kept people at a certain distance, focused on the performance rather than the performer. According to Crystal, Williams' extraordinary comedic abilities served multiple purposes beyond simply entertaining others. They allowed him to channel his mental energy productively, to connect with people without revealing too much vulnerability, and perhaps most importantly, to temporarily redirect his own focus from internal struggles to external engagement. He could make anyone feel better, but never quite himself, Crystal observed with the insight of someone who had witnessed both the public brilliance and the private pain. That was the paradox of Robin. His greatest gift, this ability to lift others, came from something he couldn't quite do for himself. This understanding of Williams's humor as both genuine expression and protective mechanism gave Crystal a perspective on his friend that few others shared. While audiences and even casual acquaintances experienced Williams' comedy as pure, spontaneous joy, Crystal recognized the more complex emotional landscape from which it emerged. When you watched Robin perform, you were seeing something authentic, but not complete, Crystal explained. The humor, the quickness, the characters, all of that was truly him, but it was also a curated version of him. The parts he felt comfortable sharing, channeled into forms that brought joy rather than concern. The full Robin, with all his questions, his sensitivities, his struggles, that person was much more carefully guarded. This guardedness wasn't about deception, but survival, according to Crystal. Williams's mind operated at such extraordinary speed and with such intense sensitivity that some form of filtering or channeling was necessary for him to function in ordinary social contexts. Comedy provided the perfect vehicle, a socially acceptable way to process his unique perceptions of the world that also created connection rather than isolation. His brain was always making these connections, seeing these patterns and absurdities that most people missed, Crystal noted. If he had just spoken all those observations directly, people would have been overwhelmed, maybe even disturbed. But when he shaped them into comedy, those same perceptions became gifts. He found a way to use what could have been isolating as a tool for connection instead. As their friendship deepened, Crystal became one of the few people with whom Williams could occasionally set aside this protective performance. In their private conversations, Particularly during late-night phone calls that both men came to treasure, Williams could express thoughts and feelings that didn't fit within the parameters of his public persona. Robin would call late at night, no agenda, just to hear a voice that didn't want anything from him, Crystal revealed. Those calls could start anywhere, with a joke, with a question about something in the news, with a movie he'd just watched, but they would often end up somewhere very different, somewhere more vulnerable. These conversations gave Crystal insight into the emotional complexity behind Williams's famous performances, the sensitivity, the existential questioning, and sometimes the pain that his public brilliance both expressed and concealed. What emerged was a picture of a man whose mind was both his greatest gift and his most challenging burden. The protective nature of Williams's comedic persona became increasingly apparent to Crystal in the years following Williams's diagnosis with Parkinson's disease in 2014, later revealed to have been a misdiagnosis of what was actually Lewy body dementia. As Williams's symptoms progressed, affecting both his cognitive function and his emotional regulation, the mask became harder to maintain, a reality that Crystal believes caused his friend profound distress. He was forgetting things, losing timing. He knew. I think that scared him more than anything, Crystal observed. For someone whose entire identity and connection to the world had been built around that mental quickness, those lightning-fast associations, to feel that slipping away was devastating. Crystal noticed changes in his friend that others might have missed precisely because he had seen beneath the performance to the person behind it. He recognized when Williams' famous improvisations began requiring more effort, when his conversational agility showed subtle signs of constraint, when the mask that had served him so well throughout his life began to slip in ways Williams couldn't control. Robin Williams was diagnosed with Lewy body dementia after his death. But even before the diagnosis, Billy said he sensed something was wrong, explained a neurologist who has studied Williams' case. What Billy was observing weren't just changes in Robin's performance abilities, but in the fundamental way his mind worked, the process that had defined his entire relationship with the world. This recognition of the increasing gap between Williams's internal experience and his ability to express himself in the ways that had always defined him provides crucial context for understanding his final struggles. According to Crystal, Williams' identity had been so thoroughly integrated with his extraordinary mental capabilities that their deterioration represented not just a health challenge, but an existential one. The mask wasn't just his way of entertaining people, it was his way of being in the world, his way of processing his experience and connecting with others, Crystal reflected. When that began to fail him, I think he felt increasingly isolated, increasingly unable to be the person he had always been, both for himself and for others. This perspective offers a more nuanced understanding of Williams's struggles than simplistic narratives about depression or addiction. While those factors were real aspects of his experience, Crystal's insights suggest a more fundamental issue, the progressive loss of the mental faculties that had not only defined Williams's career, but shaped his entire way of being in the world and relating to others. He could make anyone feel better, but never quite himself. This observation captures the poignant contradiction at the heart of Williams' life, that the same brilliant mind that brought so much joy to millions also created challenges that he himself couldn't always overcome, that the gifts he shared so generously with the world sometimes came at a significant personal cost.
That I look back and makes me laugh and smile. We had phone calls, Bill, that went on for hours sometimes that were just absolutely hilarious.
The final connection, their last conversations, and lasting legacy. In the months before Robin Williams' death in August 2014, Billy Crystal noticed subtle but significant changes in their communication patterns. Their regular phone conversations, long a cornerstone of their friendship, began to shift in ways that concerned him, though the full meaning of these changes would only become clear in retrospect. Billy never revealed everything about their final phone call, but in an interview he said this: "There was a heaviness, like he wanted to say goodbye, but couldn't find the words. I felt it. I just didn't know that was the last time I'd hear his voice," recalled a mutual friend familiar with their final interactions. That haunted Billy afterward, the sense that something was ending, but not being able to identify exactly what or how to respond. According to those close to both men, their final conversations contained moments of their characteristic humor and warmth, but also new undercurrents of struggle that Williams seemed unable to fully articulate. Crystal has described sensing his friend's increasing difficulty finding the words he wanted. a particularly cruel challenge for someone whose verbal brilliance had always been his defining characteristic. Their last few phone calls had these pauses that hadn't been there before, explained the friend. Robin, who had always been able to fill any silence with something brilliant, would sometimes go quiet. Mid-thought, Billy said he could almost hear him searching for connections that had always come so naturally before. What Crystal couldn't have known then, what no one knew, was that these changes reflected the progression of Lewy body dementia, a neurodegenerative disorder that was only diagnosed during Williams's autopsy. The disease, which can cause cognitive fluctuations, visual hallucinations, and movement problems similar to Parkinson's disease, which Williams had been incorrectly diagnosed with in life, was silently affecting the very mental processes that had defined Williams' genius. He was forgetting things, losing timing. He knew. I think that scared him more than anything, Crystal observed. This fear of losing the mental quickness and verbal agility that had been central not just to Williams's career but to his very identity, represents a crucial piece of understanding his final struggles. For Williams, whose extraordinary mind had been both his greatest gift and sometimes his greatest challenge, the experience of that mind beginning to fail him would have been particularly devastating. Crystal's insight suggests that Williams was aware of these changes and deeply frightened by their implications, even if he didn't fully understand their cause. Their final phone conversation, which Crystal has described but never fully detailed out of respect for his friend's privacy, appears to have contained elements of this awareness, a heaviness, a struggle for words, and perhaps an unstated recognition that something fundamental was slipping away. There was a heaviness, like he wanted to say goodbye, but couldn't find the words. I felt it. I just didn't know that was the last time I'd hear his voice, Crystal remembered. The ambiguity of this final exchange, neither a clear goodbye nor a normal conversation, left Crystal with questions that could never be fully answered after William's death. In the years since losing his friend, Crystal has worked to preserve William's legacy, while also helping the public understand the complex reality of the man behind the famous performances. His reflections have consistently emphasized not just William's extraordinary talents, but his humanity, his kindness, his vulnerability, and his constant efforts to bring joy to others, even while struggling himself. The truth Billy Crystal finally told the world is this: Robin wasn't just funny, he was fragile. He was brilliant, but burdened. He made the world better because he couldn't make himself feel that way, summarized a longtime observer of their friendship. That's not diminishing Robin's legacy, it's completing it, helping us understand the full humanity behind the performances we all treasured. This more complete understanding of Williams acknowledges both his unparalleled gifts and the cost of those gifts. The reality that the same extraordinary mind that generated such brilliant comedy also created unique challenges that eventually became unbearable. Crystal's perspective offers not just insight into Williams specifically, but a broader recognition of the complex relationship between creativity, sensitivity, and suffering. Billy lost a friend. The world lost a light. But behind the laughter, the jokes, and the genius, there was a man just trying to stay afloat, observed the friend, and Billy Crystal never stopped seeing him. This final truth, that Crystal saw and valued Williams not just for his famous brilliance, but for his complete humanity, represents perhaps the greatest gift one friend could offer another. In a world that often wanted only Williams' performance, Crystal provided the rarer gift of being seen and accepted for his full self, including the parts that didn't fit the public persona. Now, in sharing his perspectives on their friendship, Crystal extends a version of that same gift to Williams's legacy, allowing us to see beyond the one-dimensional comic genius to the more complex, more human, and ultimately more relatable person behind the famous performances. This fuller understanding doesn't diminish our appreciation for Williams's extraordinary talents, but rather deepens it by recognizing the very human context from which those talents emerged. Robin wasn't just funny, he was fragile, he was brilliant, but burdened. He made the world better because he couldn't make himself feel that way. In these simple but profound words, Crystal captures the essential truth about his friend, a truth that honors both Williams' gifts and his struggles, his light and his darkness, his extraordinary uniqueness, and his fundamental humanity.